Welcome to the show, Daniel Maté.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So psyched you're here, man. And I'm psyched to get to know you a little bit. And we'll talk about you and your dad's book, The Myth of Normal, certainly. We'll talk, I have some questions about you as an artist and a human, so I'm excited to get into it here. How would you introduce yourself right now? How do you typically do that?
Oh, I would say, how much time do you have? I mean, if I wanted to hit all the bases of all the various things I do, I mean, I'm a multi-hyphenate, you know, the pretentious word for that is Renaissance man. I don't really know what that means, but I do a lot of different things because I love doing a lot of different things. And I found a lot of different avenues for hopefully a singular sense of purpose or identity. Like I know there's something about me that wants to express itself, and it's found a lot of different mediums to do so, or media to do so. So the thing people may already know is that I'm the co-author of a book called The Myth of Normal with my father, Gabor. We also collaborate on a workshop called Hello Again, a fresh start for parents and their adult children, which is set to become a podcast, we hope, later this year, and definitely a book in the next few years. So that's our next book together, and that'll be more of an even collaboration between the two of us, as opposed to The Myth of Normal, where I came aboard as his like co-pilot. Yeah. So there's that aspect to me. Adjacent to that, but definitely separate from it, I am what I call a mental chiropractor, which is a completely invented gig. Someone gave me the name and it stuck. I really liked it. It described the way I like to work with people in kind of a direct interventionist sort of way at someone's request. If something is stuck in their, not in their spine, I don't have those physical chiropractic know-hows, but in their mind, in the way they're looking at a situation. If something in if something in your life is stuck, I take the assumption that something in your outlook is stuck. Yeah. And so we go to work on that and we take a walk together. That's my gimmick. Take a walk with Daniel, walkwithdaniel.com. But it's more than a gimmick. It wouldn't work without it. I really enjoy the walking aspect, and it gets me thinking creatively and it gets them thinking flexibly. So I love doing that. That's something I'm doing these days, you know, like I'm taking a walk a day with somebody and doing a lot of consults, but it's not, again, it doesn't take up too much of my time because I don't want to become a mental health professional or coach or whatever I am full time. The other side of me, which I've been doing for a lot longer than either of these things, is I'm an artist. I'm a musical theater songwriter, composer and lyricist for musicals. So I write the music and the lyrics. Sometimes I write the book, or, you know, that's what's called in musical theater, the script. As well, I often collaborate with other writers. So I'm a huge fan of all things musical and lyrical. And to that end, in terms of being someone who just geeks out about it and talks about it, I have a brand new podcast called Carice and Daniel. No, it's called Let's Get Lyrical with Carice and Daniel. Carice being my co-host, Carice Van Houten, who people might know from the show Game of Thrones. She played Melisandre, the Red Sorceress. And she lives in Holland and I live in New York, but we're both huge lyric nerds and music nerds. So we just geek out and talk about songs grouped around various themes. So that just started. And I continue to write musicals and, pursue those projects, which take a long time. And I think I've just covered the main bases.
Cool. And married, divorced, single, kids, no kids?
Divorced, no kids.
Okay, cool. And wow. All right. There's a lot to get into here, even just with the questions I have about your intro there. I want to start in a kind of a random place about that, which is the artist in you. I've recently been trying to reawaken the artist in me. When I was young, I was told, artists can't make money. You don't make money as an artist, starving artist. And my father sort of steered me in a direction, and I sort of listened to him around, that's not a good idea. I was an art major for a year. I loved art in high school. I was more a painter, drawer guy, and eventually a writer. Recently wrote a book. I like spoken word poetry. So I'm waking up this part of me, and I always like hearing from fellow artists. How did you get into art? Your unique artistic expression of writing music and writing books and also playing music. And I'm just curious, when did that start for you?
Well, it depends when you want to start the clock. It might have this, it could have started when the stars got together and decided to create something called me. Could have started when the sperm met the egg. It could have started when I first heard the Beatles and stood at the piano when I was too short to even reach the keys and would reach up and harmonize along with the records. And my parents noticed, this kid seems to have a musical bent. Mm-hmm. I've always loved composing. My piano teachers wanted me to learn the fundamentals, the Beethoven, the Bach, the Mozart, the scales, all that stuff. And I always just wanted to make up my own little songs. I loved my little songwriting assignments they would give me, like write a song about a dinosaur. And I would come back having made up some music that felt like a dinosaur to me,
Wow.
And there was a bit of a clash between that classical orientation of the teachers I happened to have, and I think the teachers my parents had landed me with. It's not like my parents had some big ideas that I was going to be a concert pianist, but I don't quite think they recognized how urgent it was for me to create my own stuff. They were fitting me into boxes that maybe other parents were fitting their kids into, and there was just a kind of relentless drive to be original and to compose my own stuff from a young age. And that got frustrated with those kinds of lessons. And so I gave up the piano for a while. But, whenever I was at summer camp and kind of socially awkward or lonely or angsty, a really good way to get people around me was to sit down at the piano and just start playing pop songs by ear.
Wow.
Just start playing Madonna or start playing Michael Jackson or start playing whatever, which I could do without ever having learned the songs. I could tell what chords they were, and I could play the melodies, and that made for, I was a human karaoke machine.
Totally.
Now, at a certain point, age 16, 17, I started noticing, well, I'm at a lot of campfires. I can't really bring a piano to campfires.
Right.
Better pick up the guitar. So I started learning guitar, which, if you want to get the girls around you to sing, you learn Indigo Girls, you learn Ani DeFranco, you expand your repertoire. So there was always this mix of motives in my creative pursuits. It was something in me needed to create, and I loved it. And I was always writing little songs, but at the same time, part of it became a survival, or it became commandeered by or recruited by my survival mechanisms, my desires to connect, my desires to feel less lonely, my desires to be attractive. All these kinds of things. So I ended up with sort of an ambivalent relationship towards my creativity. I also was very interested in theater. I was an actor. And I don't know if I was ever a really good actor, but I had really good stage presence. Like I was the kind of actor you couldn't take your eyes off because I was just, I had a big voice and expressive face. And I think I got pretty good at a certain point in college. And then I left it alone for a long time. I'm taking an acting class now for the first time in 25 years here in New York, and I'm loving it. So I had all these things going on. I've told this story in a lot of interviews. I won't get into the details, but essentially I chose a non-artistic major for my undergrad, not because there was any pressure on me from my folks to do something, quote unquote professional. My dad never expected me to be a doctor or a lawyer or anything like that. But somehow I didn't trust in my ability to stand on my own two artistic feet and say, this is who I am. And so I chose by default a psychology degree. And I was following in my dad's footsteps, not out of pressure, but out of there was a vacuum in my sense of self and really trusting in my ability to go out there kind of vulnerable and into a realm where I wasn't going to be the most talented person in the room necessarily, or the most accomplished or the most skilled. Because when you put yourself in professional training situations for the arts, you're dealing with a lot of ambitious people, a lot of very talented people who have probably worked even harder than I have, a lot harder than I have. So I ended up in this psychology degree. I did an honors psychology degree, and very near the end of it, I dropped out with a depressive breakdown. The cognitive and emotional dissonance and almost spiritual dissonance between that academic pursuit. And what I loved, which I was doing on the side all the time, I was acting constantly on campus, even though I wasn't in the theater program. I was writing songs on guitar. I was performing gigs. And I was excelling in my studies without trying. But I was stretched too thin. And I was living a life almost to prove that, hey, I can do this without really committing to it. And I can beat all you fuckers at it. It had that kind of attitude to it, which is not a powerful place to come from. It might impress people for a while. It's reactive and it's not sustainable. And it ultimately is based on fear and insecurity. And all of that just bubbled to the surface and brought me down. And then I spent my 20s sort of kind of tinkering around the edges of my life, still doing music and theater. I even recorded an album, but I didn't really believe in it. No matter how much praise I got, I didn't believe in it. Musical theater was a move I made when I moved from Vancouver to New York, which is where I'd always wanted to live, to study something I really knew very little about. I knew a lot about music. I knew some about theater. I didn't know much about musical theater. And again, that was a situation of putting myself, and it was a graduate program, an MFA program at NYU, big school, with some really talented, knowledgeable people in my class who knew more than me. And I did it on a wing and a prayer that if I put myself at the intersection of two things I love, music, theater, and put that in New York City, something might happen that's unpredictable, actually. And it was it took a lot of mediocrity in my 20s in terms of just the mediocrity of my experience, not feeling very excellent, not feeling very brilliant, not feeling very inspired, to get me to the point where I was just disgusted with that and I was open to a new idea. So I moved to New York, got that degree, studied, started honing my craft at something that I didn't know how to do, and found that I knew how to do it as I worked at it. And best of all, learning to collaborate with other people. That's what I love most about musical theater. So that's how the theater artist, the theater songwriter came about in me. And the great thing about it is I write songs for other people to sing. I can write them for myself to sing if I want. Yeah. But I'm putting words in characters' mouths for actors to interpret and for musicians to play. And it's not so lonely. It doesn't serve to confirm my whole loneliness story. It's inclusive, and I still get to be the individual, idiosyncratic, unique snowflake that I am, which is, it's like the best of all worlds. Yeah. Wow. It's so cool. I love the kind of ownership of the sort of chip on the shoulder, like in your 20s. I'll sort of reactively show people how awesome I am, but I'm not going to fully apply myself. But you did later on. Oh, and the chip did not completely dissolve or crumble. I still have it. Absolutely. The question, I'm in a relationship with it now, Yeah, which is great. Yeah. Now, I'll get to the book here in a minute. I'm just kind of building there, getting there. Sure. Your relationship with your dad, he's been pretty open about talking about that. Obviously, on this podcast, a little bit, and then on a lot of podcasts, and you too. It's fun to see you two talk openly about that and the healing you've done to get to a place where you can co-author a book. A father-son duo. Just for the listener, I'm so curious just to hear a snippet of that story for people who are still angry at their parents, adults who are still pissed off at mom or dad or feel like they're in a competition with them. Maybe what advice would you have, perhaps through a story or just general straight up advice for adult children who are struggling to reconcile and collaborate with their parents? Well, that assumes they're struggling to reconcile and collaborate. Some people who are pissed off at their parents are not struggling to collaborate and reconcile. They need to be pissed off at their parents now. And I would never, ever deign to give them advice towards reconciliation if that's not what wants to happen now. Uh-huh. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I do. I think there can be an implicit assumption, not necessarily in your question, but in our culture and internalized in us, that leads to guilt and shame, that says it's wrong to be so angry at your parents that you are estranged from them. It's wrong to be so frustrated with, or, at loose ends with your kids that you can't, you choose not to deal with them. Well, the thing about the adult parent-child relationship, and I say this every time we do the Hello Again workshop, it started as the least optional relationship imaginable.
Mm-hmm.
One person was completely and totally on the hook, whether they fulfilled this job or not, depending on their own abilities and capacities and what they were carrying. But they were, by nature, they were on the hook for that little being's everything.
Yeah.
In fact, they gave some of their genetic material to bring them into the world. And on the other side of it, the kid had no choice whatsoever in the matter of even existing, much less being born to this particular family, because there was no self to make the choice. I didn't, I wasn't around. I wasn't even in existence when life chose to have me created. So that is the most unequal starting point imaginable. Well, you fast forward 20 years later, 30 years later, guess what? It's the most optional relationship. Actually, I mean, you need friends in your life. You do. You need to have friends. Maybe not this friend or that friend. We need sexual contact, romantic contact. Most of us need that. If we have our own kids, well, then, now the roles are reversed and we're in that parental role. Yep. But the truth is, we do not, strictly speaking, need, outside of cultural contexts and pressures and internalized ideas about, normative ideas about what should or shouldn't be. So the first place to start is from a place of choice. Do I choose to be in this relationship? Now, some people, the answer is an obvious yes.
Yeah.
Of course, they don't even question it. And that's totally fine. But it's important to not skip the step of choice, because we can often feel inside this relationship like we're at the mercy of it.
Completely.
And so finding that choice point and really standing there and saying, okay, if I'm going to work on this relationship, I choose to do so. Why? Because it's for something bigger and worthwhile, right? I don't get to pretend like, okay, I choose it, but why is this so hard? No, if you choose it as it is. By the same token, you stand at that choice point, you say, well, I choose not to work on it. I'm going to let it just be. It is what it is. I'll see them at holidays. We'll get along. We'll smile. We'll keep things superficial. Completely and totally valid choice. And the other choice is equally valid. I don't want them in my life. Yeah. And I've become very sensitive to this, because people have told me when they hear our interviews that it sounds like we're saying, well, you should do this or you should do that. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Whatever you do it by choice. Now, for those people who want to reconcile and are dealing with forgiveness, I have things I could say, but first I need to sort of set the table, an equal placemat for all the different kinds of people at the table of this relationship, including those who would rather sit in the other room. Yeah.
I appreciate how nuanced that was. Thank you. Because you're helping people perhaps listening not should themselves and then feel guilt and shame that they're not in a good place with their folks or whatever. It's like, back up, let's hold on. What do I want? Right. And what's the choice here?
There are people for whom their healing, their emergence into themselves, knowing themselves authentically, getting to know the parts of them that were suppressed in childhood, really requires that the original irritants, the original starring cast members in the story called My Trauma, not be around for a while.
Yeah.
Like, it's legitimate to say, this is I can't actually get to know myself, because the fact is, things don't magically transform when you become an adult. There are patterns that are going to continue. They're still the same people. You still have the same nervous system. They have the same nervous system. Your little nervous system learned about life by being around their nervous system. It's very intense to be around your parents, actually. And you got to be responsible for that. Not that it's your fault, but that this is how it is for me. And thus, what am I going to choose? Now, for those who are looking to forgive and reconcile, there are things to know about forgiveness and reconciliation. And the quote I always come back to is Shakespeare. He said it better than anyone. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven. I think that's the line. What does that mean? It means forgiveness is not something you do or that you impose or that you certainly not that you should your way into. You don't forgive because you should. You don't even forgive because you have the spiritual intelligence to know, and you've seen enough Instagram reels to know that it's better for you to forgive. And, if I'm resenting, I'm taking the poison and hoping that they die, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's as good as the parchment it's written on. Mm-hmm. Forgiveness is grace. Forgiveness happens when something has been moved through all the way to the point that a grievance has been dissolved into a grief, and it's been felt, and it's been fully metabolized. And then there's that moment where forgiveness lands, but it's actually the absence of something. It's not. Now you can apply, there is an attitude of willingness to forgive, of saying, I long for, like a religious person might pray for the fortitude to forgive someone. Well, what is that a prayer for? It's a longing for freedom. It's a longing to be released from this burden.
Yeah.
But if you try to grit your teeth and get there because that's the right thing to do, or your guru told you to,
right?
Sorry, it's going to be false. It's going to ring hollow, and it's going to be a whole lot of cope, and
so
better better to admit forgiveness hasn't visited me yet. Mm-hmm. The ground must not be completely ready for it.
Yeah.
The ground must not be ready for it. This relationship must not be ready for it. I must not be ready for it.
Yeah. So let's come back to let's say the person is in choice. I want to reconcile or move through some of the anger, hurt, resentment from my past with my parents.
Yeah.
They're getting older. I'm getting older. Yeah. And let's say they're in a position of, I want to heal, but their parents have no interest. Their parents are like, what are you talking about? Why can't you just get over this? Well, you're just angry, and like, you've always been this way. And then the parents are just a little denser in their psychology, and they're not that willing. What do you say to that person?
I would say that your parents' willingness is none of your business. It affects you, but to even focus on how you actually don't know how willing they are. You only know how they're behaving. You only know what you're seeing. You don't know what's going on. It's a black box. Really, other people are a black box.
Yeah.
And it can feel good to ascribe motives to them and talk about their inner states and their readiness. But all you're doing is you're just taking the heat off of yourself. So, the principle that we preach in our workshop, and would that we practiced it as often as we preach it, is that if you want to have a miserable relationship, come from the attitude that it's 50-50. Now, of course, there's a sense in which that's true. But functionally, as far as an attitude goes, relationships are 50-50. It's a two-way street. No, it's not a two-way street. It's a crowded market with no lanes, and there's just no, you think a two-way street is the most organized kind of traffic. Uh-huh. A relationship is fucking chaos. So you better be 100% responsible for how you navigate the traffic, because you don't know what's going to come at you.
Yeah.
There could be like you might get crushed by a crowd of nuns or unicyclists or little kids or tourists, or some days that it might be peaceful and tranquil on the sidewalk. So it's not 50-50. If you want it to be, if you want to have some ownership over your experience, it's 100-100. But functionally, what that means in practice is it's not 100-100. It's just 100.
Right. You just deal with your side of the street, right?
You deal with your street. You deal with your experience. It's not, again, there is no side of the street. You deal with how you navigate the street, however the street is showing up. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying, like, even that idea that there is a side of the street creates a way of looking at it. We're like, well, there's a line in the middle, and I'm going to stand
against you, and right.
Yeah, well, exactly, and you just can't. It's not that reductive. It's not that clean. These are not clean relationships. Mm-hmm. So you got to kind of embrace the mess and say, okay, it's not a tennis game. It's a squash game. You're both running around on the same court, Yeah. And it doesn't have to be competitive, but it is contact. There is exertion. So I would say, number one, take your focus off what they're doing, except insofar as, okay, as far as I can tell, it's safe to go here with them. It's not safe to go there with them. They don't seem receptive. You could say they don't seem receptive to your outreach. There's also a question of language. If you come at them and saying, Mom and Dad, I'm I'm looking to heal my past relationship with you. I know there's a lot of small t trauma between us, and I need to set boundaries, but ultimately I want more vulnerability and intimacy with you. And I'm looking to hold space for us. You hear where I'm going with this. Your boomer parents might look at you like, when did you learn Swahili?
Yeah.
And why do you expect I speak the language?
Yeah.
You're not actually relating to them when you do that. You are coming to them out of anxiety with, please accept me and the way I'm looking at things. And I've been there in my own way. You're trying to convert them to a way of thinking, and then using their willingness to engage with you with that lingo as the gauge of how open they are. Right. If you back up, way up, do your parents want to have warmth with you? It's more than likely that they do. Do they want things to be less tense? Yeah. Do they want you to be able to know who they are now? Well, maybe they do, maybe they don't. Wanting to have a great relationship with your parents has to start with wanting to be able to know each other as you are now. And this is why we call our workshop in the subtitle, A Fresh Start for Parents and Their Adult Children, not a happy ending for parents and their adult children. It's a fresh start. And then the question is, well, what would a fresh start look like for you, given where you're starting? And it's going to look different for everybody.
Yeah. And so one person's 100% could be, okay, I'm just accepting my parents as they are. I'm going to keep practicing acceptance, and I'm going to relate to them without trying to change them or have them be any different. And that's going to force me to behave in a way that, how can I stay with my integrity over here and be in a relationship with them at the same time?
That's right. And other people are going to, what a fresh start's going to look like is going to be, I'm not going to tolerate feeling shitty around my parents for more than 30 seconds. I'm going to take the space I need to manage my own feelings without staying there and smiling and taking care of them. Because some people's way, I mean, I'm the aggrieved kind. I'm the one who sticks around and doesn't accept who they are, and I try to fight them and all this kind of stuff. Many people just kind of swallow it and they stick it through, and then they go home and they have a migraine or a hemorrhoid or chronic disease, which my dad's work is all about. So whatever your cope is, your way of coping, a fresh start means finding a new response, and responsibility. It's that cliche, and it's true. That is aligned with a new intention. Is it peace? Is it being powerful? Is it showing up fully? And then the other piece is you cannot bypass a damn thing. So if there's anger to feel, there's no skipping that grade.
Yeah.
Just because you know better. I had to go through years of my anger with my parents being front and center. And not only being front and center, getting more and more vivid to me. Like I'd always had a kind of dull anger towards them. But it had to get really sharp for a while as I started to connect the dots and follow the trails of breadcrumbs back home to my childhood experience and realize, oh, this is what I'm angry about.
Yeah.
And this has never been spoken before. I don't even have the language to say this. This was not allowed to be said. We could talk about a lot of things. And, anyone who knows my family or has watched my dad talk about his parenting of me knows that he's a very contrite, self-aware father. And many people wish they had a father like that. And they tell me so. Yeah. Okay. But consider this. I'm not trying to plead my case. I've got it. It's not better or worse than anybody, but there's certainly advantages to being the firstborn Maté, for sure.
Yeah.
I have Maté privilege. I'll own that. But at the same time, I have Maté burdens that y'all don't have.
Yeah.
Because I've had my father out in public telling the story of my pain from his point of view for years.
Right.
And doing so in a way that gets him a whole lot of kudos and applause. Where do you imagine that leaves me? So that's my karma. That's my curriculum. I need to stand in my experience and say, you know what? Wow. Okay. I don't care what the rest of the world thinks. I remember what it was like. And I know that's affected me. And I know the ways in which that has created a limiting idea and story about myself in my head. And I know the suffering that is caused in my life. and I own that I am the person who is the guardian of that history, and the steward of whatever future is going to ensue from here. So again, it's all about responsibility, but responsibility is not some kind of spiritual bypassing. Oh, it's all up to me and I just accept them. Fine. If you're going to accept them, you better accept your damn self too. Accept your anger, accept that you're pissed off, accept your resentment, accept that it's there, and then say, okay, what does this want from me? What does this need from me? How can I show up as much for myself, at least as I show up for other people?
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Cool. Well said. Hey, if you want to uplevel your life, your relationship life specifically, I want you to consider our Relationship Mastery program. It's 9 months of complete transformation where you become a better listener, a better communicator, you learn how to have secure relationships, and you get an experiential taste of that. You feel seen and supported and challenged to reach your relationship goals. And really, you become a better communicator. So many people have gone through this course now. And we have a done with you version of it now, which is amazing, where you get assigned a private relationship coach. You get to do live group coaching with me once a month and ask me anything you want. There's office hours where you get to meet with one of our coaches to nerd out on the curriculum. And the community is very strong. And these are people who care a lot about relationships, and they want to get what they want to get, which is they want to be in a relationship and not betray themselves, right? They want to get the relationship they want while being true to themselves. That's what most of us want. And this course is the path for you to get that. Here's what one of our participants in the past has said about this course.
What I would say to people that have been listening to the podcast but aren't ready to take that final step into joining the course, the most powerful thing has been like the partner calls. The accountability is something that you're not going to get by just listening to podcasts on your own. Because I thought the same thing, like, oh, I'm getting a lot out of just listening to these podcasts, and I'm, been in therapy, I've, done this and that. To take that deeper dive and the commitment, there's something about just the financial commitment, the time and the energy that you put into it. What you put in is what you're going to get out of it. And so, again, if, invest in yourself.
All right. Amazing words from one of our heartfelt students here at the Relationship School. If you want to change your life like they did, go to relationshipschool.com/relationship mastery, and we'll see you in there. Hey, y'all. I hope you have ordered my new book by now, Getting to Zero, How to Work Through Conflict in Your High-Stakes Relationships. It's already getting dozens of 5-star reviews on Amazon. I've heard from a lot of you. Thank you for buying the book, buying it on Audible, buying it on Kindle. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate the support. I think this book is going to help a lot of people. It's all about how do we get back to a good place after some kind of disconnection or rupture or conflict. That's what the entire book is about. And if you want a roadmap on how to get back to a good place, what I call zero, please order my book. gettingtozerobook.com. Get you some extra goodies, a conflict quiz, some additional PDFs, etc. And you can order it in all the places and support your local bookstores. Cool. Thanks. Back to the show. I'm probably going to circle back to the family stuff here in a minute. If we got time. But I want to dive into the book a little bit. I've recommended this book to every person here at the Relationship School, all the students that go through our courses, and really anyone I see. To me, it's the best book on human beings I've read in a long time. And I want to summarize what I got from the book succinctly and get your feedback.
Sure.
And have you let's talk it out so that we can kind of talk about the basic premise of the book.
Yeah.
And then we can dive into some of the nuance. But my take on the book, and so really what I have been teaching over here, and Gabor actually really helped me get this many years ago, that we, as young people, as babies, toddlers, etc., we obviously have a primitive high value on connection and belonging and closeness and attachment. And at a certain point, a youngster starts to learn really quickly what is okay and what's not okay, and begins to sequester their truth for strategies that get connection and avoid hurt, etc. And that split that I just call this inner conflict or core human split, as I've called it in my book, if that goes on too long, too often, that is what is really at the root of so much mental health suffering, disease, chronic illness, etc. And so it's the split within oneself, right? And we live in a society and a culture that is sick. And then we have all these really often superficial symptom related approaches to solving that problem. And you and your dad and his work and your work have all been about, now let's get to the root causes here. Right. And let's actually see if we can find out what's at the bottom of this. Mm-hmm. In the book, you guys challenged the notion of mental health. Like what is this mental thing? And my reframe on that is, I wish we could call mental health relational health. Like we have a relational health problem here because so many of these early injuries are relational in nature that then set us up for illness later on. Yeah. And that in oneself through relationship, to me, it's a relationship book. So I'm like, this is the best relationship book I've ever read.
Thank you. One of the nicest compliments I've ever gotten about the book was an interviewer who said that he could, as he was reading he's read all my dad's books before, but he said that this one, he could feel that the writing was relational. He could feel the relationship between the co-authors. And that meant a lot to me because that was a carefully, a carefully bottled wine for sure. That took us some time to get the grapes right. And
yeah. So I just, the abandoning of oneself and then how chronically we do that in life as adults to get relationship and to get a job and to get a date and to, it's this chronic self-betrayal that creates so many of our problems. So how is that in terms of like a summary of the book?
It's one of the best summaries I've ever heard of the book.
Oh, wow.
It was dynamite. I mean, you started, some people, depending on the book is a prism. You can look at it from a number of different angles and see a bunch of different things, but all the facets are connected. You came at it through the relational side and the side of the inner split, the attachment, authenticity, tension that we write about.
Yep.
Some people might say, well, it's a book about, why is our society facing so many chronic health issues? Well, you came at it from the other end, that one of the outcomes of this split in a society that basically makes that split inevitable by stressing parents and by disconnecting us from our relational nature and telling us that we're mere individuals who are born to be isolated and competitive, is that we end up with this idea that I have this thing called mental health, which is taking place inside my individual metaverse, my mind. And on a certain level, there's a validity to it because, I've got a kind of bipolar diagnosis that I wrote about in the book. Well, that is happening inside my mental sphere. It's subjective, right? But it certainly affects all my relationships, and it was born in the crucible of my earliest relationships.
Yeah, completely.
And some of the healing can happen internal to me, and some of it has to happen by learning new ways of relating to the world, to my life, to other people. I love your summary. I got nothing to add. No notes.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And so I'm not trying to toot my own horn over here, but so my book was about repairing this, like acknowledging that this is what happens. And then the way forward actually is to heal inside of ourselves, is to go into conflict, go into adversity, go into struggle with other people, advocate for ourselves, not leave ourselves behind. And that the healing is in continuing to be oneself. Can I just keep being myself and, embracing the impact that I might not get what I want out there, a relationship or a job or whatever. But I don't want to leave myself behind.
Well, I think that's a very inclusive umbrella for talking about what healing is going to look like for many, many people. And what I like about it is it sounds like it's about the building of a new skill or an atrophied old muscle that you learn to stand in the face of certain kinds of adversity that would have just blown you over before.
Yeah.
And hold on to yourself, hold on to your sense of self in the face of things. And that's going to look different for everybody, because not everybody copes by suppressing their healthy anger and being a people pleaser. I mean, Donald Trump's course of healing, if that was ever possible for him, which it looks, I mean, he's
dismal.
it looks pretty dismal, right? He's got the kind of personality that's so insulated from reality, including his own emotional reality. And his life has afforded him such a cushion, a material cushion, that he can sit on and not have to feel the spikes underneath. They just make everyone else bleed. But a course of healing for someone like that, and many of the narcissists in public office on all sides of the aisle, would be learning to feel their own vulnerability, and holding on to themselves would look like, oh, when I want to be grandiose and jump to defending myself and putting other people down, what am I trying not to feel?
Right.
What is there to feel? And you get to wondering sometimes, or wishing that you could just dose the water in Congress with mushrooms or something like that. And give all these people ego deaths. So I'm just saying that there are different kinds. People are starting from different places. But yes, for many of us who are conditioned to not trusting our power, ourselves, our emotions, it is going to look like building a new skill set and of standing in the face of those adversities. And actually, never mind not tooting our own horns. Whose horn are we going to toot? Let's imagine a sax player saying, well, not to toot my own horn. Band leader would be like, well, do please. That's what your job. So my horn is, because you have your gift to give, and it's come out in the form of your podcast and your book. Well, my mental chiropractic service takes people it meets people at the point of that adversity, at the point of that struggle. If someone's willing to say, I'm stuck, it means that they've gone into the fray and they don't know what to do in some area of their life, a job, a relationship, a particular conversation they don't know how to have, parenting, health, whatever it is, Yeah. And then having a shift of perspective in the face of the most stressful experience of being stymied and stuck, where the trauma is expressing itself the most loudly and obnoxiously. If we can shift our perspective on that in a quick way, well, what are we doing? We're subverting the logic of trauma, which says you are limited, my friend, for the rest of your life.
Right.
So it has been written in your nervous system, so shall it be done. You're fucked. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what if a simple change of perspective, and not an attitude adjustment in the sense of positive thinking or something facile,
and not a bypass, right?
Not a bypass. Actually looking at, and it starts with getting really sick and tired of the limitation.
Agreed.
Really saying, I don't know my way out of this, but God damn it, this does not feel true to me.
Yeah.
I can't think of any other options, but there's got to be something. I mean, that's where kind of Neo had to get in the Matrix before he was willing to take the pill that would take him through to the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting how we humans get so fused to a negative narrative or a trauma loop, right?
We always go for the best available narrative. That's the crazy thing. The only reason we don't choose a more empowering one is because we don't see it.
Yeah.
It's in a blind spot. The trauma one, as we say in the book, these apparent foes, whether it's our addiction or our self-abnegating, putting everybody else first qualities or whatever else, they came along to protect us and save our lives at a certain point in our lives. They made complete sense in that circumstance. They were the best available. Mm-hmm. They were the best worst option.
Yeah.
And then they become the only option, which is to say not an option, but a sentence. A life sentence, spoken once and then set in stone, right?
Yeah, totally.
So the healing thing is not to make that wrong, but to create a little bit of room to create a better option or two better options. And the minute you have an option, well, then if you go back to the old way of seeing it, then you are making a choice, and you can say, okay, well, I'm going to choose to see it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you say to and then I want to come back to the vulnerability comment. What do you say to the spiritualists who are like, the non-dualists who are like, there's fundamentally no problem here, Daniel. You just need to kind of accept reality, and this is what happened, and it's all just occurring, and it's all, I don't know, like that. You know how people kind of spiritualize trauma and pain, and then they sort of gloss over like, oh, there's actually a nervous system in there. And anyway,
Yeah, I would say have a nice day. I'd say have fun with that.
Yeah.
I mean, if really that is how it is for you, great. Why are you telling me? Like non-dualists can be some of the most dualist thinkers, just like atheists can be some of the most fundamentalist people you meet,
Right.
You can hide out inside anything. Now, it's not my place to judge anybody, whatever works for you,
right.
But also I would say, if I wanted to engage on the merits of what they're saying, I think it's in the Course in Miracles tradition that they talk about level confusion, because ultimately the big punchline of A Course in Miracles is that nothing in the reality we think we're living in is real. It's all an illusion. It's all just sort of a play in the mind of God. And we either identify with love and expansion, or we identify with fear. And so even war and poverty and rape and genocide are not real. Now, that's a weird thing to say on the ordinary human plane. If you get into the text and you get what they're talking about, that I can start to grasp the contours of, on a certain spiritual level. I can see how now, but that is dangerous nonsense in the hands of most human minds.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So there's something called level confusion, where you take something that is a truism or even a truth at a certain level of understanding or in a certain context. But if you take that content out of its proper context and you try to import it into another one, it becomes a big, fat, noxious lie.
Yeah.
So if you're standing in the face of someone's experienced trauma, which is not just subjective, I'm sorry, it's happening in their nervous system as well. It's concrete. There are physical substrates to it, it's not simply an attitude or a mind state or whatever. It actually exists as vivid, dynamic, measurable energy and behavior. If you're standing in the face of that and your response is, well, this isn't real, if that's your first response, I have questions for you about what happened to your compassion for yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
To your empathy. Now, there are moments when I'm working with somebody where it becomes a very empowering thing when they're on the verge of seeing, oh, I just saw through something. It's not as solid as I thought it was, but you got to earn that. You got to get there. Right.
Totally.
Otherwise it's just a new dogma, and you're being just as dualistic about that as the dualism you think you're opting out of.
Yeah. I mean, and we can change our perception. And when we do, and you guys write a little bit about this in the book, that you can change your physiology. If you see something differently about your past, your physiology your body can start healing itself.
That's right.
There's a lot of power in that.
That's correct. There is a lot of power in it. But again, you have to start where you are. Am I in touch with where my physiology already is before I start struggling around and pursuing some more enlightened things so I can get out of it? Trying to get out of it is the trap. It's what keeps you in it.
It's such an interesting, I want to say flaw, but that's a little too pathological, of the human being, of looking for shortcuts. It's like the hedonistic adaptation of, I want a way around this. I don't want to have to feel discomfort, right? And again, to me, the power in this book and the message y'all are sharing is you must be willing to feel discomfort, actually, to heal. Like there's sort of a imperative almost there.
Yeah, if only because, I mean, another way of talking about traumas is emotional injuries. And I like that because trauma, again, all these buzzwords, I get very wary when words start being used too much, whether it's vulnerability or boundaries or anything you start seeing everywhere. I'm like, hold up. Whoa, we need to find a less proprietary, less trademarkable, less sellable version of this. Because it can just get dumbed down and generalized and whatever. I mean, that's my little axe to grind. But so emotional injuries is just a more, I think, kind of objective way of, or less esoteric way of talking about it. And when you have a physical injury, you can't heal it until you realize it's there.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you can't take painkillers for it, but you better do something. You better rest it. You better elevate that leg. You better take a bath for that tendon problem.
Yeah.
You better tend to it in some way. So yeah, for a lot of us, feeling the emotion, having some kind of somatic sublimation of it by feeling it and moving through it is important. But I don't like encouraging people to think schematically of, oh, first I have to do this and feel this, and then I'll feel this. Healing is very mysterious. And it's very customized. Yeah. We all have a curriculum. The question is, what wants to happen next? What hasn't happened yet? If I've never felt it, well, you know what? The good news is it's trying to make itself felt in my life anyway. I'm just used to finding ways to shove it to the side. Okay, well, so how can I welcome it a little bit? It's banging on my door. How can I open the door just a little crack? But instead of being like, okay,
step 2 is,
am I on step 3 of the healing journey? Am I on step 1772,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you and your dad define trauma in the book as really a disconnection from oneself.
Yeah.
I think that's how you said it. And to me, again, if I want to heal my trauma, then based on that definition, I need to reconnect. I need to get connected to my experience. But that's what so many people, the vast majority of people, are avoiding because experience contains discomfort.
That's right. But I mean, again, if we're honest, so you got some Brooklyn sound effects going on behind me here.
I can't hear them, so we're all good.
Oh, sirens. Okay, that's fine. There's a lot of discomfort already happening. You're just comfortable with it.
Good point.
And then when crises come along, like chronic illnesses or sudden suicidality or a psychotic break or even just like chronic headaches or a divorce or whatever. I mean, a divorce was a huge wake up call for me. All of a sudden, the things that I've been normalizing, that I've been comfortable with, ain't so comfortable anymore. And the thought of going back to them is just unthinkable, but I'm in some no man's land. So now I can either double down on I'm a victim and why is this happening to me? Or I can ask, what is this for? Why is this happening for me? What's the opportunity in this?
Yeah.
And so reconnecting with ourselves. Yeah. And the way I really like to think about healing, and this helps me, because I am resistant to any kind of doctrine or dogma, even the ones that people make out of my dad's work, maybe especially the ones that people make out of my dad's work, because that's just part of my upbringing is to be so close to his words that I don't want anything to be too set in stone. And so the way I think about it, and watch someone take this and make a t-shirt out of it, but is that healing wants to happen anyway. Healing is a natural. I mean, there's chaos in the universe and there's cohesion in the universe, and healing is it's a cohesive force. It's a natural dynamic that wants to bring things together and into alignment with themselves and with everything else.
There's an evolutionary impulse to it, right?
Sure, and you see trees do it when they get a gash in them, or when they get killed and fall down. That's something they rejoin fire. With their forest fire. Everything. There's healing happening all the time. And so if you think of it as a natural occurrence, like say a headwind or a river, something that has a current to it, do we want to ride it in the direction it's going, or do we want to try and impose our will on it? And if we do want to ride it in the direction it's going, what does it want from us? And that's always, again, going to be different depending what point in the river are we getting on. Is the water white, or is it kind of calm and gentle? Where are we trying to go? Where do we envision? Where do our dreams want to take us? What do we envision for ourselves? So the healing journey is the most open-ended, customizable, choose your own adventure there is. The only thing you can't choose, or the only thing you don't get an option about, is where you're starting from.
Right.
You got to actively choose the one choice you have, which is, this is the life that I've been given, and these are the circumstances I'm in. Everything else, it's up for grabs.
Yeah, I love that, because I kind of hear you speaking to the victim in each of us when we fall into our victim position. Those are some there's some steps there, even though they're not linear, but there's some things I can do, right?
There are some principles.
Yeah.
There are principles of walking or riding a bike or flying a plane that, if you know those principles and you embody them, then you can deal with a whole lot of different conditions and circumstances.
Yeah. I want to come back to the vulnerability and we'll start winding down here. I just, your comment about, say, political narcissist as an example, like their move might be to go vulnerable or is to go vulnerable. And I just wanted to add one thing to that, which is yes, and at a certain point, they need to be vulnerable in a relationship.
Oh, sure.
That felt important to say.
No, absolutely. And if it sounded like I was discounting that, not at all. I mean,
because vulnerability in a silo, right, is just it's vulnerability in a silo.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason,
isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, vulnerability in the face of God, but then I put my chain link armor back on when I go out into the world.
Or I go home.
There's a reason. Yeah. Right. There's a reason that Charlie Chaplin in his movie The Great Dictator, playing this kind of buffoonish version of Hitler. Well, at the end of it, the Führer, the fascist, actually stands in front of everybody and gives a very nakedly vulnerable plea for human kindness and fellowship.
So powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we need. That kind of leadership. Well, man, this has been amazing and very rich. I could talk for a long time, I think, here with you. So it's been fun. Before we get to where folks can find you, anything else you want to say as we wrap up? Just it could be about the book or healing. Just anything else that's on your heart and mind.
Well, just that I'm grateful to be a part of this, I wasn't sure before the book came out how much I would have to say about it, because my whole story as well, my dad's the big fish and I just helped out or something. Mm-hmm. But to be invited on shows like this to talk about it, I really enjoy the opportunity to wonder about these things with willing partners in that conversation. And it's been great talking to you too. And I'm loving the fact that people are getting so much out of the book. It means a lot to see, and I'm scared for the next book because it's going to be a lot more personal for me. I'm going to be a lot more out front. But that's another topic, like we were talking about before, that whenever we share that we're doing that, people are like, oh my God, that's going to be a book. I need that, because everybody in one way or another has something to deal with in that arena of the relationship with the parent when you're a grown up or vice versa. So, it's a really cool ride for me to be doing this work. And, I'm also grateful that I get to continue doing my artistic work as a musical theater writer, as a musician, having nothing to do with helping people, or if I am helping people, that's not my primary responsibility. My primary responsibility is to be true to what wants to be created in me that doesn't necessarily make sense or things like that. And I need that part of me to be active. Otherwise, I would start to feel, and there's moments when I have started to feel, that I'm getting swallowed up in something that isn't my own creation. Mm-hmm. And just like I said about my childhood when we started, that was one of the original creative traumas, feeling cut off from what I was put here to do. Right. So writing with my father, hey, it's creative. I get to use words. What have I been doing for the past hour? Putting sentences together in ways that I think are fun and that I can sense have some juice to them. Well, that's cool. Okay, cool. Now go do that at the piano. Go do that when no one's listening. Go do that when you don't know if your show's ever going to get produced. That's the hard stuff.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for that reminder to the artist in me that's hearing that right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whew. Yeah. Well, thanks for being so vulnerable also, and just, with your own story and relationship with your dad and this work and making music and all that. It's really, really cool.
You're welcome. I mean, look, you got to know. Vulnerability is part of it, it's also fun for me to share this stuff with people, and knowing that people have been following his work for a while, and then being like, hey, well, there's also, like my ego likes it too. So it's not, if there's courage and vulnerability in it, great. There's a lot of pleasure and self-interest and satisfaction in it too, which is, I wouldn't have it any other way. This is not martyrdom for me. This is not difficult. This is long time coming.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. I can't wait to see what's next with you. One last question. We here at the Relationship School, we want to help young people. And so I always ask our guests, hey, if I had a room full of 1,000 high school students and I could only teach them one thing about relationships or share one thing, and you were whispering in my ear, what would you want me to tell them?
Well, if I was whispering in your ear, I would wonder why aren't I talking to them?
Because I got the mic, man.
Then I'd say, go off, King. I would say, like, what's the hardest learned lesson that you've come? Like, what's the thing you learned the most recently? Tell them that, because that's the thing you were latest to get to. Mm-hmm. If I had the mic, which
you're the first person that's pushed back here in such a beautiful way. Thank you.
Well, I'm like, well, what am I Cyrano de Bergerac over here? Why don't I get to talk to them? You've got this. If I was talking to them, I'd say, especially when it comes to romantic relationships, talk to me in a few years. I'm still figuring it out. I wouldn't know what to say. Then I would get vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Then I would have to admit that I'm literally at my wit's end. That all my cleverness and all my know-how and all my whatever has not cracked the code of what does it take to harmonize all of our different kinds of longing for connection, for eroticism, for intellectual stimulation, for social aliveness. Bring those into the most intimate arenas in our lives where our deepest wounds lie. Try and make it fit with the practicalities of our life. Learn to trust ourselves enough to know when we can trust somebody else and then be worthy of their trust. I ain't got the answers to that. And I would tell them, you may be figuring this one out for a long time, depending on what you're carrying. And maybe you'll figure it out in relationship, and maybe you'll figure it out in the aftermath of relationships falling apart on you. And that would be a vulnerable thing for me to say, because that hurts. That hurts to say.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you. People can find you at danielmaté.com. Is that right?
That's where if they want to see my sort of musical theater type stuff, they can find me at walkwithdaniel.com for the mental chiropractic stuff. And I do a free consult for anyone who wants to ask me questions about it. 15 minutes of just hanging out and see if it's a fit for you. They can look up Let's Get Lyrical with Carice and Daniel on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Google Podcasts. Look out. There's another podcast that's very similarly named that doesn't have our names in the title. Apparently multiple people thought of naming a lyric podcast after an Olivia Newton-John song last year. So, but yeah, Let's Get Lyrical with Carice and Daniel, and they can subscribe there. And we have a Patreon page for people to subscribe and get bonuses and stuff.
You're active on Instagram, I see too.
Yes, I'm active on Instagram, Daniel B. Maté. HelloAgainProject.com is the sort of clearinghouse for all the parent-child stuff. It's a very unupdated website, but if you go there and sort of visit there every now and then, eventually there's going to be a mailing list you can sign up for. We just have so much going on, but getting around to updating everything. So yeah, multiple ways to stay in the loop.
Great. We'll put all those in the show notes. Daniel Maté, dude, thank you so much for being you and sharing your art and heart with us.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you so much for having me.
Yo, as you know, I've dedicated my life to helping people with their relationships, right? I want to solve this problem so that all of you can work through your differences and have fulfilling, amazing, badass partnerships and relationships, family, coworkers, friends, whoever. And I have trained a ton of relationship coaches, almost 100 certified relationship coaches, to help you specifically work through your relationship challenges. So I want to invite you to a special deal we're offering to the podcast listener, where you can get 50% off your first month of coaching with one of our amazing relationship coaches. Okay, if you're tired of therapy, it feels like that's going around in a circle, or you want to actually set goals and accomplish your relationship goals, hire a relationship coach. Okay, go to relationshipschool.com/get coaching now, and then use the coupon code FIRST50 to get the 50% deal off your first month of relationship coaching. Super psyched to have our amazing coaches serve you and help you get to the next level. If you live in the United States and you want to receive text messages from me about my personal life or little daily reminders, you can do that now. It's so cool. And you just need to text the number 720-704-4852, or you can go to my.community.com/Jason Gaddis. And that way you can sign up for text. And if you just text me podcast, I know you came from the podcast, and I will be sending you text messages. You can always stop at any time just by typing in STOP. All right. Yeah, I look forward to connecting with you on your phone, folks.